You're listening to Simon Scriver's amazingly ultimate fundraising superstar podcast, talking all things fundraising, charities, nonprofits, and more.
This is your host, Simon Scriver, but I'm on holiday at the moment, so here is guest host Sam LaPrade.
Simon Scriver is enjoying some much deserved time off because we want him to be able to relax and enjoy his summer. And he's turned the mic over to myself and my friend David Kravinchuk. How are you, David?
Doing great, Sam.
David and I are going to talk everything conferences today. So we suggest that you relax and sort of, get in the mindset of how can I get the most out of conferences? I met David Kravinchuk at a conference. How funny is that? And David, of course, is the founder and creator and puts all his blood, sweat, and tears into the Western Canada Fundraising Conference, which has just completed its 4th year. And of course, you're from the Common Good Fundraising Agency, which we love too. Thanks for joining me today.
Super excited to be here, Sam. And, any chance I get to chat with you and chat about conferences, it's the best.
It is really a win-win for everyone. And I think, from the perspective of conferences, as an organizer of a conference, you have a really interesting perspective. But I love the fact that you just love conferences as a whole, aside from your own. Can we chat a little bit about the Western Canada Fundraising Conference? It just completed its 4th year, and I think you started in Edmonton. I was with you, blessed to be with you in Winnipeg, Vancouver, and most recently Saskatoon. What was your idea behind starting this conference in the first place, David?
Well, both Crystal, my partner in life, and my partner in business, and I started our fundraising careers in Western Canada. And, we were always, we felt a little bit isolated in our profession. We didn't have access to kind of the same large network or ability to get local professional development that we're so lucky to have in Ontario, especially in Ottawa and Toronto. So when we moved out east and started seeing the wealth of opportunities out here for people, we thought, wouldn't this be great if we could take some of this back home and share with our colleagues out west? And there is no national annual conference in Western Canada, except for ours. So we pulled in a whole bunch of favors. We asked everyone we knew if they would come and help us. People like you and Paul and just anyone who would. We wrote a very gushy, embarrassing email to Simone Joyot to ask her if she would come and headline, and she graciously said yes. And that's really how we got started back in 2016.
It's amazing when you think about the investment, because I think you and I have both been blessed. I have certainly worked for organizations who have made professional development a priority, which meant sending me to, of course, conferences, making sure I had enough CFRE education points. I've also made an investment in myself as well. How important is it, do you think, that people see, senior leadership see, that this professional development for fundraisers is so important?
Yeah, it's critical. And at the risk of being self-serving as a conference organizer, regardless of whether it's conferences, whether it's educational courses at your local community college, or if you're lucky enough at your university, webinars, seminars, luncheons put on by your local AFP. Professional development is critical to the future of fundraising and to the social sector in Canada. And I'm alarmed, actually, at the lack of support for professional development in organizations that certainly have the budget, but don't make the choice to educate their teams on an ongoing basis. And a lot of those organizations, no surprise, then find themselves struggling to keep talent, and often wonder why, right? I mean, we know this about salaries and that sort of thing, but professional development really plays a key role there. And I think it's actually a bit of a crisis. If we are going to have a strong future for our organizations, we need all senior leadership to really look at the importance of that investment and talk about it and advocate for it with boards, with donors, with regulatory agencies too.
Yeah, agreed. A quote a quote comes to my mind, and it's somebody, an HR person and a senior leader talking, and one of them says, well, what if we train all of our people and they leave, and what if we don't and they stay? Right? So meaning they're not going to be up on the future trends. They're not going to be up on what's coming up, the good, the bad, and the ugly of maybe a new technique, or I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that if we don't invest in our people, as you and I both know, and Jason Lewis, of course, a good friend, talks about the war on fundraising talent. And fundraising talent, the turnaround of 18 months is not sustainable fundraising. That's transactional fundraising. There's no relationships built in 18 months that can sustain an organization. And I think the professional development is a big piece of that.
Yes, you're exactly right. We need to do something about that turnaround, and professional development is one of the major keys for that. And to build those relationships with your donors in an ongoing way. I mean, as a consultant, and I'm sure you've seen this too, Sam, is that often you're the person who's been working at the organization the longest, and you're the paid consultant, after you're there about a year and a half or 2 years. You become institutional knowledge, right?
Absolutely. It's so true. What do you think we should do?
Well, let's have a conference.
Let's have a conference, David.
Okay.
I think, in terms of the way that people attend conferences, I love to do two things. I love to really build up to a conference. So if I'm going, let's say, to Congress or to Icon, or hopefully FINS, which is my dream, or I had the pleasure of attending IFC, I try to spend about the first leading up 6 weeks to that conference, I start really focusing on the social media and looking at who's going to be there and picking my speakers and really trying to just not arrive on site and not really know who's there. So I try to really build up to that. I reach out to you, David, are you going to be there? Or Leah Eustace, or, any of our friends, Paul Nazareth, and say, who's going to be there? To try and build that network around when I'm going to be at a conference. And then at the conference, I really try to make sure that I'm getting the most out of it. Not only maybe, and we'll talk about this for a second too, not only by maybe being in every session, but by being strategic about my time at the conference. And then post-conference, really, let's talk a little bit about that too. So can you tell me a little bit about how you prepare for a conference and some of the tips you might give us, maybe through the lens of an organizer?
Sure. Yeah, I don't think it's a lot different than what you're doing, Sam. It's trying to figure out who's there. I'm wearing a few hats often at a conference too, right? It's if I'm lucky enough to be speaking, I want to connect with maybe some of my fellow speakers and learn a little bit more about that side of things. I also love to find out, and some conferences are great at this, who the attendees are, outside of my own personal network, because it's a great opportunity to, maybe meet that person you've been following on Twitter, or have had some exchanges on a Facebook forum or something like that. So yeah, I definitely dig into that. And then of course, I'm always looking at those opportunities to meet with clients and spend some quality time in kind of an exciting and learning environment. I don't know about you, but I find conferences are some of my best times for really having quality meetings with clients. You're both out of each other's offices here, and everyone's kind of excitement levels are up and juices are flowing and you're really getting creative. So I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. And I love when I followed someone on Twitter and I really love what they're saying. And then I see that they're going to be at the same conference
Yeah. Yeah.
and reaching out to them. Can we talk a little bit about at the conference? So what I love to do, and you've heard me speak before, and I really try and do this, is I'll say to people, maybe if I'm speaking, or even, if someone's saying to me, Sam, how can I get the most out of this conference? I'll say, take all the notes you want. You're going to get, potentially handouts. You're going to get maybe links to PowerPoint presentations, but just take one piece of paper and write 1 to 10 on it, or 1 to 5, whatever sort of makes sense to you, and catch maybe 10 really crucial points from the conference as a whole. Take that one piece of paper and put it on your bulletin board and see how much you can actually accomplish. Because I think what I've done for years is, before I sort of came up with that technique, is I'd go to a conference, I'd be so jazzed, I would come back and I'd be like, I got all these great ideas. And then you know what it's like, you sit back at your desk and, Frank needs you and Sarah needs you over here, and you sort of forget some of those things you learned. So I try to find ways to engage post-conference and use that time during the conference really wisely.
Yeah, right. I think that's a really great idea. And I know you and I have talked about formalizing that in some places. I think it's fantastic. One thing I would say is also manage expectations is really important. I remember, especially early in my career, I would go, oh my God, I have this great opportunity to go to a conference, and I'm not gonna screw this up. I'm gonna be the best student ever, and just like being almost terrified that I'm not taking enough notes or getting enough learning in. And the reality is, if you walk away from a multi-day conference with 2, 3, 4, or 5 great ideas that you can use to improve donor relationships or fundraising or efficiencies, holy cow, like that's massive, right?
Absolutely.
Each one of those ideas is worth a ton. So I think that's kind of my number one. A couple other things I like to look at on when I'm on the ground in a conference is, especially in a larger conference, if you're in a room with an amazing speaker and you kind of get swept up in that the moment, and you are just dying to talk to the speaker, and there's a massive lineup, like 90 people are standing in line, and the next session starts in 10 minutes, and you haven't had a coffee or eaten in a day and a half. And you stayed up late the night before with some colleagues you haven't seen in a long time. One of my favorite things to do is to resist the temptation to stand in that line and then pass out, and to find the person who had really cool ideas that were asking questions or sharing ideas during that session. I like to beeline for that person.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right? Like, I really loved what you said about this, or, oh, I work in an organization similar to you, or I'm having this problem you have. Can we go get lunch, or can we have a coffee, or will you tell me more about it? Because I love that other experts in the room as a speaker, so many times that enriches your session, right?
I'm totally still this idea.
Okay, good. Do it, please.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's brilliant. And, certainly, when I think about using, letting the conference, and I guess what I'm sort of saying is the conference can kind of live for months, if you will. You start sort of pre-planning, and then you go for 2 or 3 days or whatever the length of the conference is. And then that post stuff, and whether you've connected with people like you just illustrated, which was brilliant, but letting it live. One of the emails that touched my heart so much after speaking at your conference was you had a group come, and they had 4 or 5 people there, and they divided up, which they should, which is fantastic. Some went to one session, some went to another. But what they did is they made it a priority when they got back. Within a couple of days of the conference, they had a debrief, and it was what were some of the learnings here? What were some of the learnings there? So they all shared, and I got this beautiful email back from one of their senior leaders talking about, sort of how much their staff was inspired by some of the stuff that I had shared with them, and that they were going to implement some of that. And as a speaker, that touches my heart so much. in a way that, because sometimes, David, you're working on these things. You're like, is this going to inspire anybody? Is this going to actually do anything when you're sitting there on Prezi or PowerPoint, you're pounding away. You think, am I actually going to make a difference? So, and I love the fact that people do reach out after, and I encourage people to do that, not only to the speakers, but I love your idea about reaching out to others as well.
Yeah, it's those kind of relationships with people at conferences, aside from some of the more obvious ones like the speakers or your colleagues, just being able to reach out. And when we talk about networking, I mean, holy cow, right? You've got this opportunity to network with people who are great fundraisers in their own right and have had the same situations or same issues or same problems and either overcome them, or you can have like a support network, right? And it's great. I'd love to hear. I know exactly who you're talking about, Sam. And we're actually going to do, for our first time ever, a debrief as the conference organizer, a debrief with their entire team on a conference call in a couple of weeks. So I'm super pumped about that because they're just so highly engaged. I know we're going to get a ton of ideas to make the conference better in 2020.
Excellent. And let's talk about being a speaker. Do you remember the first time you had the chance to speak?
Oh, yes. You mean as a fundraiser?
Yes.
Yeah, I do.
Because I think it's one of those things, I dreamt about it for years. And then when it happened, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they've chosen me. It was so exciting for me.
Yeah. Well, I had a gentler entry into it through some small conferences organized by the organization I first started my fundraising career with. I look at every fundraising job actually that I've had, and I've always been an advocate for conferences. And because of some of that with our team and the agitating for them, actually, I realized every organization I worked with, we started a conference, and I was involved in that. So I guess it's only natural that I would have started WCFC. So I had a bit of a gentler entry into that because I was able to kind of build up some of my skills internally doing that in an audience of people that I knew very, very well. And, worst comes to worst, I would just get funny looks at the lunch counter, right, during break from people that I worked with.
Let's talk about what it's like to sort of break into that, David. Like what it's like, you and I are like, oh, there's Tom and Simone and Paul and, Simon. I mean, hearing Simon speak for the first time, I was like, oh. So what is that like to try and break in to sort of speaking at conferences? What advice would you have for someone?
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the things that helped me a lot was looking locally first. So trying to get those opportunities to do an AFP luncheon at your local AFP chapter was one way that I was able to kind of build up not just a repertoire of things that I could say that I speak about, but also to say like, I'm learning from my audience and what they need, right? And how I can deliver value for members that are paying to come to lunch and listen to me, right? And then the other thing, I think the very first large conference I spoke at was CAGP National.
Nice.
And that was, but that was with a client of mine. So I was working for another agency before I started my own. And my client at that agency and I had been working on a legacy project. And so we got together and said, wouldn't this be great if we shared this with people? So, and the person I spoke with, Tony Lee, who's a giant among plan giving fundraisers in general, and very well known in our community. So that was very helpful for me personally to kind of reach out and nervously ask Tony if he would join me in sharing some of what we've been working on. And he graciously said yes. And that was kind of the first step. So that was very helpful. If you can find somebody like that or a mentor, recently at WCFC, we had somebody approach us to do a session And originally, it was her mentor helped connect us and say, her mentor is somebody I knew, and say that, this person is really a fantastic speaker and they've got these really great ideas and you guys should sit down and talk about it. And that was fantastic because I knew that person actually quite well. But I had no idea that this was something that she was interested in doing or that sort of thing. So using your network that way, using your mentors or your close people, a really great way to kind of break into things.
I think that's brilliant. And I think I think the other point too is if you feel like you have something to offer, there's some opportunities sometimes at AFP Ottawa Fundraising Day, which I know you and I both love. We have an opportunity for that to have 20-minute express sessions. And that's really meant for maybe a new speaker, just to kind of cut their teeth a bit on the sector in terms of speaking. And so it's not, a full 90 minutes or an hour, and they get to share some ideas and get a taste for it and see if it's something they want to invest time in. Because I think it cannot be lost on us that it is an investment for speakers. Okay, I mean, sometimes from a financial perspective, we're paying to go ourselves. We're, taking hours to develop material. We're doing research. We're doing all the post-conference communications, which we all love. But I think, before you sort of maybe dive right in, it's an opportunity to find those opportunities to sort of try it out first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a huge investment for our speakers, and I can't be grateful enough. I don't know how to thank our speakers at WCFC enough for all of the work they put in. Whether it's a master like Tom Ahern, who literally wrote a specialized session, a full day masterclass for us this year. And I know he spent more than 2 solid weeks on it, plus all his other, research time, travel. And, that is just a massive investment.
Sure.
And, Sam, I know you did more than 4 things for us. Like it is just.
I loved it.
And we do it out of love. I get that. But it's a massive investment.
And I think your conference is there's just something about your conference. I really love it. It's got a great vibe. And so speaking about vibes at conferences, what are some of your favorites? We've named a couple. We've named AFP Ottawa Fundraising Day. I know we both love that. We've both attended Congress, of course, which I think is a really important conference for Canada, of course, because it kind of, sort of becomes the national conference, although it's out of Toronto every time. What are some of your other favorites, David?
Yeah, sure. I have to think a little bit here. So I also want to say, yes, I want to underline AFP Ottawa. I think that's a hidden gem, that fundraising day. It's a wonderful, wonderful conference, super high quality speakers, amazing sponsors that you can learn so much from. So I really do love that conference. Really well run. And I mean, the National Arts Center, come on.
Yeah.
And I have to also underline what you say around AFP Congress. In Toronto, I just think, as Canadians, we sometimes don't always appreciate what we have right in our backyard. And AFP Toronto Congress is a conference I would stack up against AFP Icon and any of the large scale conferences that I've been lucky enough to go to. It stacks up very, very well. So I just want to underline that one. So one of my favorites you've mentioned already actually is FIN's national conference in New Zealand. That's the Fundraising Institute of New Zealand. They're kind of like New Zealand's AFP. They do a wonderful annual conference, and I was lucky enough to speak there in 2014. And we just met a ton of fantastic people and built some lifelong relationships there. So yeah, love that conference. I am also desperate to get to IFC in Amsterdam. I have not been able to get there, and also the storytelling conference in the US. I think those two, from everything I've heard, everything I've read, and everyone I know, those are really conferences I need to get to.
Well, I'll tell you, in terms of IFC, I was really blessed. I went in 2018, and I went as a session leader. And some
Ooh,
people, I didn't know this even existed, where you go, so you receive a bit of a reduced fee in terms of the conference, but you have to pay for your own travel and stuff. But it's a great way to go because when you arrive, you've got like 20 buddies. You're all
right.
really involved in the conference. You get to meet the speakers, and you get to go a day early. And there's some really, really good things about being smart about ways you can get to conferences, because that was an opportunity for me, to be able to meet lots of people. And I knew lots of people there, but I just immediately, there's just something about a group like that. It was like 20 new friends automatically. It was awesome. And then I'm going to be speaking at the Nonprofit Storytelling Conference for the first time in October. But
Oh,
once
yeah.
again, that was an opportunity where I've been wanting to go for years and years and years. And the opportunity certainly don't take for granted at all. It's pretty exciting. I'd love to see you there, David.
Yeah, I definitely need to reach out. I've been scheming and dreaming about building a little conference exchange group. In a little bit earlier this year, Donor Box organization in the States put out their 12 best not-profit conferences in the world. And I'm so thrilled to say that WCFC was named one of them. So we've been reaching out to some of our other buddies. Storytelling Conference is one of them. And also there's a quirky one called the Central and Eastern European Fundraising Conference that's in Slovakia. So those are some of the ones that I really think could be this really interesting network of people and conference organizers and sharing kind of unique ideas. So I desperately need to get down to storytelling, and I don't know if it'll be this year, but soon, I promise, Sam.
And when this year, one that I went to this year was Planet Philanthropy.
Right.
Our good friend Jenny Mitchell and I presented together at Planet Philanthropy, which this year was in St. Augustine, Florida. It is the Florida team that put that one together. Next year it's in Orlando. And I really like the vibe of that conference too. Kashana Palmer was the opening plenary speaker, and she just rocked the house. She was fantastic. So I think those are opportunities, to look far and wide as well. I mean, sometimes as Canadians, you and I look for those beautiful southern destinations
What are you talking
instead of winter.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. You tease. I'm just excited. San Diego is the nonprofit storytelling conference this year is in beautiful San Diego. So, as a Canadian that'll be heading into winter, I'm a pretty happy girl about that.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing.
Let's
And
talk-
Sam, you went.
Sorry. Go ahead.
You went to the Maritime Fundraising Conference this year too, right?
And I'm so glad you brought them up. I adore them. Chrissy Arbuncle took such good care of me and Sarah Lyon out in Halifax. And it was a really good conference. I was the closing plenary. Rory Green was the opening plenary. And, it was just a really great opportunity. I just love people from down east. They're fantastic. And we just had a great time there.
Excellent. Yeah. And I just, I've been having some conversations with people about that conference, just randomly, not in a connected way, and hearing lots of really good things. So I'm super excited. In fact, today, a little bit later today, I'm going to be talking to Chrissy Arbuckle. Thank you for connecting us.
Yes.
I can't learn more about that conference. So
yeah. And we've talked about the speaker piece. We've talked about attending the conference. There is one group of people we could not do conferences without, and that's our sponsors, David. And, I think I drove your sponsors a bit crazy this year at the Western Canadian Fundraising Conference. I went booth to booth every morning. I'm like, hello, everyone. I was like, wanting to make sure they knew how important they are. And as a speaker, how much we appreciate it. Because I think, certainly from my perspective, is the cost of fundraising conferences are really reflective sometimes of how many sponsors are on board. And the reality is the price is what it is because the sponsors offset it. But aside from that, and more importantly to me, and you and I have talked about this, they are experts in the room and really can provide so much valuable information for us. How do you think sponsors feel about attending conferences? Do you think they feel like they get as much out of it as we hope they do?
Right. Well, look, at the end of the day, it's a bottom line issue for most of our sponsors. And so, they need to be able to justify the cost. I mean, there's massive costs, not just the sponsorship fee, but they're sending a team of people and paying travel costs and all of that stuff. So their investment goes much beyond just offsetting that massive amount of revenue that we would have to charge for tickets. I'm a little bit worried about this. I've had the opportunity to talk to many sponsors and potential sponsors through the years for our own needs at WCFC. And one of the things we like to do is just at the end of the conference, we just like to do a follow-up call with them and find out what they liked and what we need to do better and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a little bit shocked to hear that we're one of the only conferences that does that.
Oh, wow.
So I think as organizers, we take our sponsors for granted sometimes. And definitely as attendees, I think we take them for granted. I know that I was guilty of this absolutely. I remember the first Toronto Congress I went to in 2004, and going into the vendor exhibitor area and being like terrified that somebody's going to try and sell me something, right?
Right.
By the end of the conference, realizing, oh my God, these people know so much about the work that I'm doing and can help me so much. I mean, I was able to find a couple of people that back then I was working at U of A were able to help improve our direct mail program and help us save money and all that kind of stuff. So, I think we need to think about, as you said, these are fundraising experts. These are experts in your field, and they can help you so much. And whether it's you're at a conference, you have to go get your passport stamps at every vendor booth to win an iPad or not, go and spend some time with those vendors or exhibitors that work in the area that you do. You'd be amazed. And I got to tell you, some vendors and sponsors are actually going there because they say, they feel the need to support the sector and support the profession. And I know we try and get as many of those at WCFC as possible. So a lot of times people aren't there even with a sales goal. I mean, some are, but many aren't. Many are there to talk to their current clients, build relationships, and really just help give back to the sector that supports their business. So don't be afraid of them.
Absolutely. And I think some of my favorite relationships in the fundraising sector are with some incredible vendors I've worked with. And, I always love when I walk in and see them there and it's, big hugs and how are you doing and all that stuff. And I think, that's been one of the best things I've done is taken some time to invest and in getting to know them. The one group I really want to talk about is CFRE. And I remember this year you being so thrilled about how many CFRE points that WCFC was going to have. But when we look at, because it was good, it was a lot of points.
Yes.
But I think when we look at conferences, we have to kind of look through that lens. If we're going to try and get our CFRE, or we're trying to, do that recertification piece, looking at how many CFRE points, and then immediately, I love coming back from a conference and immediately putting that in to the website for CFRE so that I can keep track of my CFRE points, and it doesn't seem so huge when I go to either write the exam or my recertification. Is that something that you do, David?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing for us is to be able to get that tracking sheet and have it with you, right? So we make the effort to get it up as soon as possible before the conference, so at least several weeks, and let people know that it's on our website. You can download, print it, take it with you, right? So right at the session, you can just check that box, right? You come home, and if you were at our conference and went to every session this year, you get 17.25 points, which we were thrilled about. I think that's critical. And you're right, not just to put it in the shoebox when you get home, but to put it into action as soon as possible. And also, it's a great way to show. I like to say to people, take it in and show your boss. This is what the dollars did for your professional development. This is how many points. These are the sessions. They have a you have a nice record of all the sessions you attended, right? So I find that super helpful. And in a way, I find that form is a nice, tidy overview of all the sessions that are offered on kind of on a single page. And then I like to go and say, oh, maybe I should go in and see if I can get some of the slides from these other sessions, right. Right? So I think that's important. And I want to say a couple of things about CFRE if I can. First, we were thrilled to have them this year as a sponsor for the very first time ever. And I just did our follow-up call with them with Ashley Gatewood, who is fantastic at CFRE. And she actually worked at Finn's. I know her from New Zealand, even though she's an American and now is at CFRE. And I heard an interesting thing, and I don't know if you know this, Sam, that per capita, there are double the amount of CFREs in Canada than there are in the US.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, isn't that shocking?
That's awesome.
Right. So I feel right now we're leading the sector. And I feel so proud as a Canadian to learn that professional development, in the numbers, we're going for that certification and that. So I'm super proud of that. And I can't leave a discussion about CFRE without saying this. I'm sorry, I have to pull up my soapbox here for a second, but for the organizations that struggle to put professional development dollars into their budgets, and I'm talking about significant amounts, so people can go to a conference, multi-day conference in another city, and learn and get CFRE points. If you're an organization, if you're a senior leader in an organization that asks your fundraisers in the job description to have a CFRE certification, but you're not willing to put budget toward that, that's just wrong. And you have an obligation if you're that organization, and frankly, I think you have an obligation anyway, but especially if you are asking for CFRE certification of your team, the organization has to invest in that. And
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a really important point to mention as well. Can we do a little bit of rapid fire questions?
Love it.
Okay. So, favorite conference you've ever been to?
Oh my God. I'll tell you, it was in 2001. We went to the National MS Society Conference in the United States. 50 Canadians were invited to go down, and it blew my mind. Also, it's legendary for anybody who worked in the MS Society across the country in Canada at that point. Built relationships for life. We still talk about it, but blew my mind. Huge conference. Sitting in a room about experiential marketing and a major consultant from the US talking about, really how important it is to build emotional experiences at events, to connect with your donors and your participants, and was using NASCAR as an example in the private sector of how they build relationships with their audience. And the vice president of Procter & Gamble, who was vice president of marketing, stood up and then said, oh, well, actually, that was my project, and let me tell you more about it. And
wow.
Oh my God, this is amazing, right? Just to learn at that level, showed me the power of conferences, that you to gather people that you would never have an opportunity to meet and learn from. So, excellent. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Favorite fundraising book?
Oh my goodness. Hidden Gold by Harvey McKinnon. I would know a thing about monthly giving without that book.
I love that one too. Favorite fundraising blog?
Future Fundraising, Jeff Brooks.
Mm-hmm. Favorite fundraising speaker?
Oh man. Oh man, you are putting me on the spot. I'm a conference organizer, Sam. I'm gonna deflect a little bit, and I'm gonna say one of my favorite speakers ever, one of my favorite humans on the planet is Simone Joyaux, who I wrote, as I said, an early, gushing, embarrassing fanboy email to in late 2015 to ask if she would possibly consider coming on board WCFC. To her credit, she said yes immediately, and she has been the most supportive, wonderful. When people talk about kind of the culture or vibe that's happening at our conference, it's Simone sets that tone. Simone is the one who really has led the charge, and so I have to say Simone.
She's fantastic. And favorite thing you do that has impacted fundraising, but has got nothing to do with fundraising?
Oh my God, I need help, Sam. What do you mean?
So for me, I love reading business books. That kind of thing. Or I love to, read or watch like documentaries or stuff that, like I read a couple of books. Like I read the Obama letter book, I should say. And that was really about relationships and how he built these relationships through letter writing. But it didn't have anything to do with fundraising.
Right. I gotta say that I'm addicted to all the best television shows. We're in peak television right now, and I can't tell you how many Crystal and I are addicted to watching and learning storytelling from that. I've had the opportunity to speak on to pull in some of those ideas shamelessly to kind of illustrate some points around how we can do better as fundraisers and really learn from this. Of course, you can do it from fantastic movies, but when you think about long form storytelling, that's one of my secret addictions, and it's also something that definitely makes me think about the power of storytelling and influences fundraising.
And so much of fundraising is storytelling. Oh my heavens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last rapid fire question. Favorite fundraising podcast?
Oh, well, Simon Scrivers. I mean, how can I say any different?
But plus it is my favorite.
Is there even another one?
Yeah, there are. I know. But he is the best. He's awesome. And I think I met somebody recently, and it was a few months ago actually, and I said to them, "Oh, are you going to be going to this conference or that conference?" And it's someone that's been in the sector a really long time. And her response was, "No, I think I've got it all, and I don't really need to go to conferences anymore." And I was so heartbroken because to me, we can always learn. Like I sit in your session, I'll sit in John Lloyd's session, Jennifer Collins' session. I think it doesn't matter who it is. I always get something out of it. And I hope we can always be that way in this sector, that there's always something to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And the value, again, to me of a conference is not just about the learning or going to get that checklist of your 3, 5, or 10 pieces that you bring home. It's, we say it sometimes around WCFC, and I know Crystal rolls her eyes when I say it, but, it's like a celebration of our profession. We aim to have some of that feeling there. And I know it's a bit cheesy, but, it's true. And when we look at other sectors who go to, these giant conferences in their for-profit area, and money is, no expense spared, that's about celebrating the people who are there and the work that you've done through the year and all of that. And we need that too as fundraisers. So, there's so much more than just learning. It's the networking component. I don't know if you ever want a new job or a new client, it's a pretty important thing to do regularly too, right?
Absolutely. And I think too, it really rejuvenates me, not only in knowledge, but also, that I don't feel alone. I talk a lot about when I went to a conference and I heard Bishop Desmond Tutu say that this was a noble profession. Mm-hmm. And I remember that moment. That was a turning point for me in my career. I was always about 98%, proud to say I was a fundraiser, but there was this 2% that made me feel a bit, that I was begging, that whole begging for money thing, right? There was a bit of that feeling like, oh, but then when I realized that it is a noble profession and we're raising money to impact vulnerable people or, advance a mission, I realized we only want to have joyful giving and joyful getting. And when I realized that, my whole outlook on my career changed, and I know I became a better fundraiser. And that moment happened at a conference.
Right. Yeah. And it could only happen at a conference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
David Kravinchuk, I adore you. You're one of my fave people on the planet. And the fact that you would spend time with me today and share with Simon's listeners all your insight into conferences, I'm so grateful.
Oh, well, thank you, Sam. I'm grateful to have any chance to sit and talk to you about conferences, to chat about fundraising, anything. So thank you for the opportunity to get together with you today. And I can't wait till we connect again in the near future.
Excellent. And thank you so much to Simon Scriver for turning the mics over to myself and David Kravinchuk. I'm Sam LaPrade. You can find me at samlaprade.com or Sam LaPrade CFRE on most social media. David, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at David Kravinchuk, or you can find us on the web, CG Common Good, cgfundraising.com. And the conference website is always wcfc.ca.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, everyone. And be kind to everyone. Take care. Bye.
You've been listening to Simon Scriver's Amazingly Ultimate Fundraising Superstar podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and head over to changefundraising.com to learn more or get in touch with Simon. Or don't. Whatever. You're big enough to make your own decisions.
Hello, this is Morgan Freeman. For discounts on Simon's best-selling online fundraising courses, go to www.changefundraising.com/training and use coupon code PODCAST. Complete them in your own time, wherever you want. Get busy living or get busy buying.